One concept that is unique to Virginia Henderson's need theory is the fact that she created 14 basic human needs based on Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a model for understanding the motivations for human behavior. It maps different motivations onto a pyramid, with each level representing a different human need. These include psychological needs, safety, love, and belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. For Virginia Henderson's theory, she explained components 1 through 9 are under Maslow's psychological needs, whereas the 9th component is under the safety needs. The 10th and 11th components are under the love and belongingness category, and the 12th, 13th, and 14th components are under the self-esteem needs. Another concept that is unique to Virginia Henderson's need theory is her definition of nursing and how she explains the role of the nurse. I won't go much into this since I explained all of this in the previous slide, but I think her definition of the nurse is unique because Henderson believed without the nurse, the patient would not gain independence again and would not be able to perform basic needs as he or she did before the sickness. Another way to explain Henderson's definition of nursing, as stated by Henderson herself: I say that the nurse does for others what they would do for themselves if they had the strength, the will, and the knowledge. But I go on to say that the nurse makes the patient independent of him or her as soon as possible. The nurse is expected to carry out a physician's therapeutic plan, but individualized care is the result of the nurse's creativity in planning for care. The nurse should be an independent practitioner, able to make independent judgments as long as he or she is not diagnosing, prescribing treatment, or making a prognosis, since those activities are for the function of the physician. The first assumption Henderson implies in her theory is that nurses will provide care to each individual until he or she can provide independent care to themselves. She believed nurses are able to learn how to identify problems and risks that could impact individuals' chances of becoming independent and implement appropriate interventions to teach individuals how to overcome those risks throughout life. The second assumption that Henderson implies is that the patient is more likely to return to their previous state of health if he or she is motivated and driven to put in the time and learn a new way of living. The patient must be willing to cooperate and practice these things on a daily basis in order to perform tasks independently. The third assumption implies that nurses will commit themselves to the patient day and night. This means no matter how much the patient is struggling, the nurse will continue to motivate the patient and work daily to develop the skills the patient is lacking to achieve independence. The fourth assumption Henderson implies is that the mind and body are inseparable and interrelated. In this statement, Henderson is applying the importance of not only helping the patient overcome physical needs, but the nurse also has to consider the patient's biological, psychological, sociological, and spiritual needs to reach the expected outcome. Virginia Henderson proposes the basic human needs is the central focus of nursing practice. Her entire theory is based off of 14 basic human needs, and she implies the health of the individual is dependent on whether or not that individual can perform independently. She implies the importance of the 14 needs and how nurses can work to achieve those needs to hasten the patient's progress in recovery. Henderson also proposes the importance of the nurse's role is to make the patient complete, whole, or independent. She states, the nurse is temporarily the consciousness of the unconscious, the love life for the suicidal, the leg of the amputee, the eyes of the newly blind, a means of locomotion for the infant, knowledge and confidence of the young mother, the mouthpiece of those who are weak or withdrawn to speak. Additionally, Henderson goes on to say, the nurse does for others what they would do for themselves if they had the strength, the will, and the knowledge. But I go on to say that the nurse makes the patient independent of them as soon as possible. Henderson believes the patient would not be where they are in their time of recovery without the aid of the nurse. Henderson's theory does have a few limitations that is still unclear to readers today. In her theory, she does a great job listing the 14 basic human needs as individual should acquire in attaining health and survival. However, the prioritization of the 14 needs was not clearly explained, whether the first one is a prerequisite to the other. Having that information could allow nurses to prioritize the most important needs an individual should learn if he or she is limited to only a few. Another limitation in her theory is that she provides very little information when assisting the individual in the dying process. She states it is the nurse's role to continue to care for the patient throughout the dying process, but she provides no further information. One last limitation to Henderson's theory is that some of the activities listed in Henderson's concepts can only be applied to fully functional individuals, indicating that there would always be patients who require aided care, which is contrary to the goal of the nursing indicated in the definition of nursing by Henderson. Not all individuals can return to their previous state of health by developing independence over these 14 basic human needs. For example, if a patient is homeless, if a patient is paraplegic, if the patient has severe depression, developing independence over the 14 needs may not help the individual in their current situation. There may be a total different plan of care to return to their previous state